Do you ever think about what the limit is of your net worth? Is there a maximum? Could it grow forever? If you're a good steward and live off less than you earn, can it keep increasing indefinitely? I suppose it could. What if you put your money in an interest-bearing account and let it sit for decades? What would happen? The value would increase, of course. What kind of person would even think to do this? I'll tell you who. Ben Franklin. Yeah, the guy in the $100 bill. Story time. Cast your mind now. In 1785, a French mathematician, Charles Joseph Mathon de la Cour, who in addition to having a name that was too long, he wrote a parody of Ben Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, where he mocked the unbearable spirit of American optimism, represented so well by Franklin. A French critic? Who would have thought? The Frenchman wrote a story about a fortunate Richard leaving a small sum of money in his will to be used only after it had collected interest for 500 years. Franklin, who was 79 years old at the time, he wrote back to Delacour, thanking him for the great idea and telling him that he had decided to leave £1,000 each to the cities of Boston and Philadelphia on the condition that it be placed in a fund that would gather interest and support the public good for the next 200 years. Side note, don't you just love how Franklin responded with optimism to some French guy that made fun of his optimism? It would appear that Ben Franklin knew how to troll people back in the 1780s. Well played, Ben. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Mike, and I retired at age 41. If you're interested in hearing about early retirement served up from someone who's done it with a side helping of personal finance, please consider giving a like and subscribe. I appreciate it, and it helps the channel out. So, good old Ben Franklin left the equivalent of 1,000 British pounds to two of his favorite cities. The experts equate that to roughly $4,000, which was quite a hefty sum in 1790 when Franklin died. What were the cities supposed to do with this money? The purpose was to grant loans to entrepreneurs going into the trades. An early loan helped Franklin with his printing business, so he figured he'd help others the same way. The loans would have an interest rate of 5%. So how did that turn out? Well, after 100 years, Philadelphia's $4,000 grew to $70,000. Boston's $4,000 grew to over $300,000. Apparently Boston was better at managing Franklin's money, growing it to over 4 times what Philadelphia did. Franklin's will stipulated that at this point, after 100 years, 75% of the funds could be used for public works. Philadelphia opened the Franklin Institute Museum, and Boston created the Ben Franklin Institute of Technology, a 2-year tech school. Well, and then what happened? After another 100 years, it was now 1990. Philadelphia's amount grew to $2 million. Boston's amount soared to $4.5 million. At this point, Franklin's 200-year-old game was up, and the cities could now spend the money however they wanted. Even adjusting for inflation, these amounts are far greater than the initial bequests made to the cities by Franklin. So why did I mention this weird story? It perfectly illustrates that when it comes to money and compound interest, time is your friend. You want as much of this as possible. What if Ben Franklin had left similar amounts in something that resembled today's market? Sadly, the Dow Jones and S&P 500 didn't exist back then. The Dow Jones wouldn't be created until 1884, and the dawn of the S&P 500 wouldn't happen until 1928. But let's play what if, because we can, and use the S&P 500's historic return of 10%. What would become of Franklin's gifts? After 100 years, $4,000 becomes $55 million. After 200 years total, it becomes $759 billion. And that's for each city. Can you imagine? But that would require 200 years of financial discipline. And what are the odds that government at any level could do that? Would you even consider doing this as part of your legacy? Please let me know or why not in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. You know, one dude actually tried this. Inspired by Franklin's philanthropy, in 1936, multimillionaire Jonathan Holden used $2.8 million to fund a series of trusts, some of which weren't due to be released for up to 1,000 years. Sadly, this wasn't allowed. The idea was leveled in court and the money was converted to trusts that paid out yearly instead. They didn't like the idea of disrupting an economy in a distant future. They calculated that his donation to the state of Pennsylvania alone would have been worth $424 trillion. So yeah, that might be disruptive. But again, what a great illustration of how adding more time can greatly enhance your investments. Next time, we're going to look at ways to extend the time you have in hopes of compounding your dollars to new heights. So that's it for today. Take care and remember to do your best and forget the rest. Peace!